So, Impact Wrestling Against All Odds was this past Saturday, and we're still feeling the ripple effects from Impact Against All Odds as some massive news, some massive information, some huge fallout, and possibly some spoilers going forward for Impact. I will give you a spoiler warning once we get to them, but let's start off talking about Sami Callihan, because the closing moments of Against All Odds saw Sami Callihan fired by Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Don Callis. Now, if you're not aware, this past weekend at Against All Odds, Kenny Omega retained his Impact World Championship. The bout collector faced Moose at AEW's home base of Daily's Place in Jacksonville, Florida, and received a helping hand from his friends, his fellow elite members, the AEW World Tag Team Champions, the Young Bucks, in the closing moments. Now, after dodging a spear from Moose, and in which Moose ended up hitting the referee, Matt and Nick Jackson came out and delivered a trio of super kicks followed by a BTE trigger. They then helped Moose onto Omega's shoulder so he could hit the one-winged angel for the pin and victory. Now, as they celebrated, the lights went out and out came Sami Callihan. Of course, Sami Callihan is scheduled, or was previously scheduled, to face the winner of the match at Slammiversary for the Impact World Championship. He, along with Tommy Dreamer, defeated the Good Brothers earlier on in the show and made his presence felt as the next challenger to Kenny Omega's championship. He beat down the members of the Elite with his trademark baseball bat, and just as he was about to hit Kenny Omega with the baseball bat onto the steel chair, in a similar vein that he smashed the face of Eddie Edwards all of those years ago, Don Callis, who was on commentary for the main event, intervened. He berated Sami Callihan and told him that he was fired by Impact. Now, Scott D'Amore, who was on commentary, also called the ending BS and then argued with Don Callis as the show went off the air. Now, in an update, Sami Callihan has officially been removed from the Impact Wrestling roster page, so they're trying to keep this up as a legitimate angle. In reality, not wanting to burst anyone's bubble here, in reality, of course, this is not real. There's not a lot in pro wrestling that is. Some of the best storylines are when they blur the lines between fiction and reality, but this is obviously very much a fictional storyline. Sami Callihan re-signed with Impact Wrestling late last year. Don Callis doesn't even have the authority or the power to fire Sami Callihan anymore, because he's not even an executive vice president with Impact Wrestling or Anthem Sports and Entertainment, because he stepped down, removed. We don't really know the details of that story, but he's no longer an executive with the company. That was confirmed a couple of months ago at this point. So the story here is, how does Sami Callihan get back into the main event of Slammiversary? How does Don Callis eventually lose his position as an executive with Impact Wrestling as well? That's going to all, I guess, we're going to find that out at some point. And that kind of continues on what we're going to talk about in a second once we talk about some of the spoilers. Obviously, we did a post-show reaction stream talking about Against All Odds. It's on the channel, so be sure to check that out. I've thoroughly enjoyed the show. The main event angle, I've seen quite a mixed reaction to it, actually. And that's kind of the reason I wanted to talk about it a few days afterwards, because I think it's always important with angles, when you're watching them happening in real time, that you sort of reflect on them a couple of days later. How did it make you feel? I still don't really have an issue. I really don't have an issue with how that show ended. I know a lot of people didn't like the way that it ended. They thought it was too convoluted and there was too many moving parts. There's the ref bump, the Young Bucks, then the BTE trigger, the super kick, and then the one-winged angel. Then Sami Callihan comes out. He attacks people, but then Sami Callihan is fired. There certainly was a lot of chaos and a lot going on. And was it overbooked? I suppose it kind of was. The thing I would say is that Impact was obviously very much aware that a lot of people were going to be watching that match because of the AEW influence, because it was taking place at Daily's Place, because of the Young Bucks interference. They were very aware that arguably more eyeballs are going to be on that than there would be previously. So they've got to kind of try and get it in all at once. Try and get everything in there at once and try and do a big enough angle that not just the Young Bucks showing up, not just Moose losing, but also the firing and Don Callis and all that kind of stuff. They wanted to get all of those angles in at the same time so that people will tune in on Thursday night to watch Impact on Access TV, so that they do question, are the Young Bucks going to come to Impact? So they question what happens with Moose next. So they question, is the Slammiversary main event even going to go ahead? How does Sami Callihan get back? So they question Don Callis. How is he going to lose his executive vice president power? Because we know he is at some point. It's just a matter of how. So all of those questions, I think it was convoluted and maybe it was a bit too much. Myself, personally, I didn't have a ton of problems with it. I must say, I didn't have a ton of problems with it. Some of my biggest problems with the match, if you're watching on the watch-along or you're watching in the post-show, was some of the production elements of how they sort of lit up Daily's Place and having a black background and having no AEW branding. I found all of that just a bit bizarre, and they could have done the production a bit better. But look, I didn't have much of an issue with all of that. But look, make no mistake about it. Sami Callihan will be returning He will be still in that main event against Kenny Omega for the Impact World Championship at Slammiversary. Don Callis will eventually lose his executive authority because he's no longer an employee. He's no longer signed to Impact Wrestling. He is a talent with AEW. He's working as a backstage consultant certainly on Kenny Omega matches and segments, but he's with AEW right now. He's got no affiliation with Impact Wrestling anymore. The only reason that Don Callis is appearing on Impact Wrestling episodes and Impact Wrestling segments is because Kenny Omega is. The moment that Kenny Omega drops the Impact World Championship and leaves Impact, so will Don Callis. He will vanish too. And as I've mentioned before, part of the reason why Impact or Anthem themselves haven't come out and confirmed Don Callis' departure from the company is because they're going to do it in storyline first. This was kind of what I predicted, first of all, but it's kind of being proven to be correct now that when these stories first started to break, even going far as back as December last year, but certainly over the course of the last couple of months, when these stories started to break, it would have been very easy for Impact Anthem to come out and say, yep, Don Callis is no longer an executive with the company. He is still a talent with us, or he is still a talent that he's going to appear on Impact Wrestling episodes going forward. Something like that they could have, but they didn't. And their silence was almost deafening in the fact that obviously they wanted to weave it into the storyline first, and that's what they've kind of done. So Sami Callihan isn't fired. I think it's interesting that Sami Callihan now can, I suppose in terms of the storyline, can tease doing whatever he wants. So I'm sure we'll see Sami Callihan show up on episodes of Impact where he's not supposed to. He'll appear at Skyway Studios, because you have to remember, he wasn't supposed to show up at Daly's Place in Jacksonville. He's on the banned list. The reason we're doing it in Daly's Place in Jacksonville is to keep people like Sami Callihan and the Good Brothers away, because Sami Callihan, nobody wants him inside of an AEW ring. Sami Callihan's banned from all of these companies because he's reckless. He's got the baseball bat. He smashed Eddie Edwards' face with it, all that kind of stuff. You can't trust him. He's a reprobate. He's a scoundrel. Why would you have him in AEW? We barely have him in Impact Wrestling. We have to deal with him, all this kind of stuff. So I suppose maybe if you really wanted to do some great cross promotion, not only would you have Callihan appear on episodes of Impact where he's not supposed to and he invades Skyway Studios and all that kind of stuff, but you could also have him invade upcoming episodes of AEW Dynamite. Now, will that happen or not? I doubt it, to be honest with you. I know he appeared in Jacksonville inside Daly's Place for this match, but I just don't know if I see him appearing on episodes of Dynamite, because with this AEW and Impact Wrestling working relationship, AEW's been happy to loan Impact Kenny Omega. They're happy to have maybe the Young Bucks appear in this match. They're happy to have Matt Hardy and Private Party appear on episodes of Impact. They're happy to have Tony Khan do the paid ads or appear on Impact as he did last week as part of the AEW and Impact Wrestling Summit. But what we have seen is there is obviously a reluctance from AEW's part to promote Impact on TNT. They just haven't done that. They haven't seen any adverts. We've barely seen them mention, look, we had a champion versus champion match. We had Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann for both the Impact and AEW World Championship. And on Dynamite, it was barely promoted. You barely heard anything about it. Certainly no Rich Swann appearance or anything like that. So do I think because of an Impact Wrestling storyline, Sami Callihan's going to appear on Dynamite? I don't, because we haven't seen any precedent at this point that would indicate that Callihan would show up. Now, if they really wanted to promote Slammiversary, which I hope that they do, as I mentioned, I would hope that Callihan does appear on an upcoming episode of Dynamite. I hope that he does appear maybe after Kenny Omega defeats Jungle Boy in a couple of weeks, because he will defeat Jungle Boy. When Kenny Omega defeats Jungle Boy, then Sami Callihan shows up at the baseball bat, tries to attack Kenny Omega and says, look, I'm not signed to anyone. I can do what I want and do all that kind of stuff. But I just don't know if I really see that happening. But only time will tell, and look, fingers crossed something like that could happen. It would be certainly exciting if it did. Now, another thing I did want to talk about, and as I mentioned, spoilers are ahead, possibly here, but Impact Wrestling kind of spoiled this themselves, because Impact Wrestling released a social media, a teaser for the upcoming episode of Impact Wrestling on Access TV this coming week. They released this during the Against All Odds pay-per-view, which kind of, again, indicated as to what is going to happen this week. It certainly, this was crazy. So Against All Odds is on the air, or just even before Against All Odds went on the air, Impact Wrestling, Access TV, I don't know who released it, but they released a teaser for this week's episode on Thursday night on Access TV, and it basically indicated a surprise return of someone they haven't seen in a while. It indicated the fallout of Against All Odds, all this kind of stuff. I know they tried to keep it relatively spoiler-free, but now coming out of Against All Odds, we certainly know really what this is going to say. So if you don't want to know, spoilers ahead, we'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right. So the first thing that it possibly did spoil is the next feud for Moose, and that being with the returning Chris Sabin. because a new Impact Wrestling promo aired on Access TV during Against All Odds to promote, easy for me to say, gosh, I can't talk today, to promote Thursday's Impact show, which may give spoilers as to the fallout of Against All Odds. Now, obviously, Saturday's show featured Kenny Omega defending the Impact World Championship against Moose in a match that was taped at Daily's Place in Jacksonville, Florida. But the promo for Thursday's edition of Impact on Access TV featured Moose without the Impact World Championship, attacking TJP before Chris Sabin makes the save and calls Moose out for billing himself as a wrestling god. So it could indicate here that Moose's next feud is going to be with Chris Sabin. Now, we haven't seen Chris Sabin on Impact Wrestling television for, what, 4 or 5 weeks at this point? We haven't seen him since, I think, Under Siege, where he was part of the number 1 contenders match for the Impact World Championship, which Moose won. We haven't seen him since then. So we know that Chris Sabin is back on Impact Wrestling television, and the feud seemingly going forward is going to be against Moose. I find this one really surprising, really surprising. I mean, the videos are there, so I can't lie. I really thought we were going to see a situation where I never felt Moose was going to beat Kenny Omega at Against All Odds. It was a tape show. If they're going to do a title change, it makes sense to do it at a big show like Slammiversary, especially now that fans are going to be in attendance. That makes total sense to me. So I didn't ever think that Moose was going to beat Kenny Omega at Against All Odds. But I did think that given the name that Moose is, given the star that he is for the Impact roster, given the fact that it looks like he has re-signed with Impact Wrestling, given the fact that obviously there were other promotions interested in Moose, whether it's WWE or AEW or whoever, given that a lot was made about him saying, look, I want to win the World Championship before my contract expires in June, and it looks like he has re-signed with the company, all that kind of stuff. I was really under the impression that the guy that was going to defeat Kenny Omega for the Impact World Championship, I told you I can't talk today, for the Impact World Championship would be Moose. I think given the guy's improvements over the course of the last 12 months or so, given his run as the TNA World Heavyweight Champion, his improvement in the ring, his improvement on the mic, physically he's transformed, he's stepped up in big matches. His performance at the Hard to Kill match earlier this year in January, which he was teaming up, ironically, with Chris Sabin and Rich Swann against Kenny Omega and the Good Brothers. His performance at Against All Odds this past weekend against Kenny Omega was a spectacular, fantastic main event between Moose and Kenny Omega. Given all of that, I thought this is going to be the guy. This is going to be the guy that defeats Kenny Omega for the Impact World Championship. And it looks like that's not the case now. That isn't going to be the case because Kenny Omega seemingly is going to be feuding with Sami Callihan heading into Slammiversary for the Impact World Championship. And we're only a month away from Slammiversary at this point. So it looks like Moose is going to be facing Chris Sabin. And don't get me wrong, no disrespect to Chris Sabin. He's an Impact Wrestling legend, former 2-time TNA World Heavyweight Champion, or at least a former TNA World Heavyweight Champion. So that means a former Impact World Champion. It does feel like a step down, doesn't it? It does feel like a step down, and it just feels a bit strange. I really did think, I thought, right, Moose isn't going to beat Kenny Omega at Against All Odds. But with Sami Callihan, maybe the insistence is that he is going to be in that Slammiversary main event. Okay, so they do the triple threat match that people thought they were going to see Against All Odds. They do that at Slammiversary. Moose, Sami Callihan, Kenny Omega. Moose is the guy to dethrone Kenny Omega. He's the guy that becomes the Impact World Champion. He's the guy, realistically, you can build the company around. He's just re-signed to the company, so he's going to be there for what? Another year, 2 years, something like that. Even though, full transparency, Moose hasn't confirmed that he signed with Impact. But the fact that it's June right now, it's June, and he said that his contract expires in June, and he's still going to be a part of Impact Wrestling at least until Slammiversary. So, again, it would indicate that, again, the expectation is that he is going to stay, or he is going to re-sign, or that he's very close to re-signing with Impact Wrestling. Again, I just find it very, very odd and very strange that this is the guy that's red hot right now. Now, there was discussions about his future. They seemingly are finished now. He is going to stay. The general feeling was that this should be the guy, this can be the guy, this maybe is going to be the guy to defeat Kenny Omega for that Impact World Championship. And he loses against Kenny Omega at Against All Odds, and he was protected. He was heavily protected in that loss in terms of, look, nobody kicks out of the one-winged angel anyway, but you had the interference by the Young Bucks. Moose maybe even seemingly had the match won when he was going for the spear, but the Young Bucks came out, a couple of super kicks to him, then a BTE trigger, all that kind of stuff. So he ate, 3 super kicks, BTE trigger, one-winged angel. It certainly was protective. He was hardly beaten clean by Kenny Omega in the middle of the ring. So I think he was protected, and I think the outcome was right at Against All Odds. But feuding with Chris Sabin going into Slammiversary, I just really didn't see that coming, I must say. Now, there's no doubt the match would be good, and the match would be great. And I'm not massively keen on the whole chair shot to the head there. As you can see, he gets the hands up, but still, we're living in a CTE world at the moment, so I don't know about how I feel about that. But yeah, a feud between Chris Sabin and Moose, not that it doesn't do it for me, because again, the match will be fine and the match will be great. I just don't know if is that a Slammiversary match? Is that really a good feud for Moose coming out of that Impact World Championship picture? I don't think it is. Moose for a while in Impact has felt like such a big deal. The whole time he was the TNA World Heavyweight Champion, and you think amount of time he spent chasing that World Championship match just against Rich Swann. He was TNA World Heavyweight Champion since, what, April last year? And he held that all the way until March of this year. Pretty much a year. And all the hoops he had to go through in terms of facing Willie Mack and losing in an I Quit match to get the Impact World Championship and going after Rich Swann's best friend to challenge for that Impact World Championship and all of that kind of stuff. And then he loses against Rich Swann. You're thinking, well, is he actually going to get the opportunity at the Impact World Championship? And eventually he does, and he loses, and now he transitions out of that feud to face Chris Sabin? I just don't know. The only thing I can think about with that I think maybe does make some sense is that maybe Moose and Chris Sabin aren't going to feud after Raw. Maybe it's a case of who was the one that cost Moose the match at Against All Odds? That was the Young Bucks. The Young Bucks cost Moose the match. So maybe if we're going to have a match at Slammiversary that involves the Young Bucks, maybe it's going to be the Young Bucks versus Moose and a tag team partner of his choice. Previously, I said if the Young Bucks were going to have a match at Slammiversary, I would like it to be against the Motor City Machine Guns. I would like it to be against Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley, because Generation Me versus the Motor City Machine Guns was fantastic back in TNA, back in 2010, 2011. Those were awesome matches. They had great chemistry. They're still spoken about to this day. But we know the situation with Alex Shelley. He's not under contract of Impact. He never was. He had to pull out of the match at Hard to Kill because obviously he's a frontline care worker and they changed their policy about going places where people aren't vaccinated and all that kind of stuff. It became impossible for him to travel to Nashville to do his job, his regular 9-to-5 job as well. It just became impossible. He couldn't do it anymore. So the hope was that maybe that would change and eventually he would come back. Maybe it's a case of, look, Alex Shelley can't come back for Slammiversary because the situation preventing him from wrestling at Hard to Kill was the same situation preventing him from wrestling at Slammiversary. If Alex Shelley can't come back, maybe the outcome is, okay, we wanted to do the Young Bucks versus the Motor City Machine Guns. We can't. What we can do, though, is have the Young Bucks cost Moose the match at Against All Odds. Moose and Chris Sabin then, they're enemies. They face off for a bit on Impact, and then suddenly it becomes the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of situation. Moose and Chris Sabin team up in the same vein that they did at Hard to Kill earlier this year, and it's Moose and Chris Sabin versus the Young Bucks at Slammiversary. I could maybe see that, and then suddenly that does feel like a big match. That does feel something like I would say, okay, that's worth Moose not winning the Impact World Championship. That's worth Moose not being involved for the Impact World Championship at Slammiversary because he's in a match against the Young Bucks and inside of an Impact Wrestling ring in front of fans. That makes sense. So who knows what that will be, but it's certainly interesting. Finally, another spoiler involves Don Callis and Scott D'Amore. Now, this same promo that was released by Access TV shows Impact Wrestling Executive Vice Presidents, in terms of kayfabe, Scott D'Amore talking to Don Callis. Now, Scott D'Amore says that the Anthem Board of Directors is sending someone to address some sort of situation. We know what the situation is. That's never happened in all of the years he has been running Impact. So, obviously, the situation is that Don Callis fired Sami Callihan in the closing moments of Against All Odds. And that Anthem, the Board of Directors, are sending someone to address this. Again, this is what my prediction was for a while when it comes to Don Callis. This whole Don Callis situation we have covered. I know I've spoken about it extensively here on the channel about what his future will be with Impact, how he's going to be written off of television, how on television he's going to be removed as an executive vice president of the company. And this is the way that I kind of predicted it. The way my prediction went previously was that Don Callis' abuse of power would be out of control. He would no longer be able to be impartial. He would no longer be able to be an executive because he's also the manager of Kenny Omega. Eventually, they would realize, look, your judgment has been skewed. You can no longer be impartial. You can no longer fulfill your executive duties with Anthem and Sports and Entertainment in terms of the Impact Wrestling brand. It's obvious that due to your management of Kenny Omega, due to your relationship with Kenny Omega, your integrity and your ability to be impartial has been compromised. You can no longer do this effectively. Therefore, the board of directors of Anthem Sports and Entertainment have decided you are no longer fit to be an executive vice president with the company. Therefore, you are removed as an executive vice president of Impact Wrestling, and effective immediately, you have been terminated from Impact and Anthem Sports and Entertainment by the board of directors. That's what I think the reality is. We've seen this bubbling up for the last few weeks with Scott D'Amore going up to Don Callis saying, look, you have to decide, can you be an executive vice president of Impact, or are you going to be Kenny Omega's manager? Because you can't be both. And gradually, over time, again, these abuses of power, of getting the Good Brothers to attack Sami Callihan, firing Sami Callihan, possibly having the Young Bucks be involved at Against All Odds as well. All of this kind of stuff has been building to eventually Don Callis being removed from his position as Executive Vice President of Impact Wrestling, which in reality happened several months ago. It was reported way back in December. I think it was Nick Houseman of Wrestling Inc. first reported it back in December that Don Callis was going to leave Impact. He was going to become a full-time talent with AEW. People questioned it at the time, myself included. It's been proven to be accurate, and this has just been a gradual process. And again, the reason that Impact and Anthem haven't come out and confirmed this is because they want to weave this into storyline. Some of the best storylines and moments in pro wrestling history is when that line between fiction and reality is blurred, and that's what they're trying to do here. Because for several weeks at this point, when Don Callis goes, I'm still an executive around here, I can still book matches, I can still make matches, people in the know, and certainly most Impact fans are smart, they've probably rolled their eyes and go, well, we know you're not exactly an executive, where are you going with this? In reality, where they're going with this is that they want, Don Callis will eventually be removed as an executive on television, which will then confirm what we know in real life to be that he's no longer an executive with Anthem Sports and Entertainment. I think the only issue, I suppose, here is that in reality, they probably wanted to keep this storyline hush-hush and keep it a secret, and they haven't been able to. They haven't been able to keep the storyline a secret because when Don Callis was removed from his executive vice president position on the Anthem Sports and Entertainment website, social media and pro wrestling fans being what they are realized, wait a minute, Don Callis is removed. Why has he been removed there? I don't get that. In reality, he had been removed because in real life he had been removed. And I think Impact wasn't anticipating that fans would notice. Fans notice, and now fans know. If they'd have been able to keep it quiet, this whole Don Callis being removed would certainly feel like a bigger deal and a bigger story. But in reality, we've known about it for weeks. And I think this coming week on Impact is going to be the beginning of that. And maybe either the person from Anthem shows up this week or the week after. Over the course of the next few weeks, Don Callis will be removed as an executive with the company. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these Impact stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Impact Wrestling, WWE, you name it. Get involved in the comment section below. All opinions are welcome. Really enjoy interacting with you guys. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or how have you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.